You now tuned in to the hottest podcast in the world, the Stay Woke Podcast, right here on the sonicbreakdown.com.
So today's episode is going to be about specifically 3 albums that we determined rated. And so we got Brandon in the building, and he's going to go over his hip hop albums because we already went through our hip hop albums with Trav and myself. So we're going to hear his list now.
All right. So in no particular order, we're going to start off with Run the Jewels 3.
Nice project.
Of the Run the Jewels album with Killer Mike and LP.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2 is going to be The Wild with Raekwon. And then I'm going to go my number 3 album, underrated album, is going to be Odyssey, The Iceberg. It was a wonderful album.
I want to go back for a second and go back to Run the Jewels 3. Is that the first time you heard Run the Jewels, or are you very familiar with their work prior to this third installment?
I'm actually very familiar with their work. I've actually heard LP's solo project. I heard Killer Mike's solo project, and I have all 3 of the physical copies of Run the Jewels. So yeah, I'm very familiar with them.
And what about this Run the Jewels 3 stood out to you that made it be put on this list, besides the fact that I agree with you that I don't think they get enough love? Even though they do get a lot of love, they still not getting enough because the album is that good.
Yeah. To be honest, I would, if I can go back to Run the Jewels 1, they've just been progressing as a I don't call them a group. I call them more like a collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
But they've gone from just going back and forth, and now it's becoming a lot smoother with their transitions into. They sound like they're both in the booth together, just rapping together, and they play off each other so well. On their third one, they deal with the same political emphasis within our society. They're very honest, and just the way they carry themselves in their voice, their vocals are just amazing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I agree with you as well as that you do hear evolution in the sound of the structure of their flow, from Run the Jewels 1 to this one. What I will say is that's one of the things that I really liked about Run the Jewels 1 in particular is the back and forth that they had, and that it wasn't as smooth. That's that I did like, because that brought it back to me for the classic hip hop of, that back and forth. I'm gonna finish your line, you're gonna finish my line, and it has that roughness that gives it that grittiness. That's one of the things I do like. Not to say that on this current album, Run the Jewels 3, the smoothness that you do talk about, that is present, but I don't feel like it takes away, because I feel like the difference between Run the Jewels 1 and Run the Jewels 3 is, that evolution, the comfortability of working with each other, but also the type of production. I feel like on this, LP is still giving us the hard-hitting, close to boom bap sound that we grown to love from them, but it is a little bit more sophisticated in its layering. And so I think that's what accompanies and adds to the smoothness in their delivery and their flow. Because I think if they flowed as smoothly as they do now over the production that they had on Run the Jewels 1, I don't feel like I would have liked it or been as inspired by it as this one. So I think it was a transition, but it fits the production on this one as well. So that's just how I feel about it. But I definitely think that you're right, that there is a difference in their flow, but the content is still strong. The lyrical care that they put into it is still there. Yeah. And the balance that they have between each two when it comes to the verses is still very present.
If I could add on to that, like you were saying with their evolution throughout, their layering is amazing. I don't know how many beat changes I could count that happened, and they just happened very smoothly. And like you said, how they take care of their lyrics, like it feels like they rewrite. If something is wrong, they rewrite that stuff, and they go back and forth. Like they're just trying to be the best in that booth. And with that production that LP does, I would agree that it's very sophisticated. And the fact that he can make these gloomy and grim and dark beats and them still sound really well on them and flow with the boom bap and just put their lyrics in it, like that's why I made my list on it.
Moving on to your second album, you said the second album was, because I know it was Raekwon and then Raekwon the Wild, and then what was the third one?
Odyssey, the Iceberg.
Okay, so I'm gonna save Odyssey for last, because people that heard my take on it, I do want to dive deeper into that one as well with you. But let's go to Raekwon, because that made my honorable mention as well. I had a tough time picking between him and Jid. But like I said prior, is that I thought that Jid just didn't have the same notoriety, so I felt like I needed to give him a little more love. What about this Raekwon stood out to you?
So Raekwon, with his solo project, I feel like in terms of him as just a solo artist, has struggled to find himself without being in the Wu-Tang Clan. But this one, I just love the braggadocious storytelling that he does, whether it's coming from the streets or just his experience in life. I know that's super broad, but that's just one thing that just makes me grab onto him when I'm listening to it.
Did you have a particular favorite track off this album? And the reason why I asked that is because when me and Trav, when we were discussing that, one of my favorite tracks on it was Marvin, just because of the feel of it. It like I said with Trav as well, is that it felt like it was a sample, and then I saw some interviews and production notes that it wasn't a sample, that they created that out of scratch to make it sound like a Marvin sample, which I thought was pretty amazing, because it's difficult to make something sound sampled and not be sampled. And the other thing is, I can definitely understand your opinion about Raekwon's solo albums, but I would say this album reminds me more of the Purple Tape, and that's when I really fell in love with Raekwon.
Yeah.
And so I felt like he took it back to that essence, but he still kept it very contemporary and modern in its sound.
I would agree with you guys on the fact that Marvin would probably be one of the strongest tracks on it. I can't necessarily pick one out right now, but I would say it's definitely a super strong track.
So now let's get into your third track, Odyssey, the Iceberg.
Yes.
What was your impression of this album altogether? Besides that, that you enjoyed it, what aspects of it did you really gravitate towards?
Odyssey does a very good job at making sure he's not preachy when talking about political issues and just life in general. And his wordplay and double entendres that just go over your head over his amazing production, it just blew me away.
What did you think about the production? Because I felt it was very jazz, Afrocentric, but in such a way that if you're not really very familiar with that, you just feel the hints of it, but it's layered throughout the entire project.
When it comes to the production, it sounds so original for the times of 2017. It obviously brings me back to funk, jazz, but it feels like it's just brand new when I hear it. And I want to compare it to Pimple Butterfly, because this one, it feels like somebody sat down and created this music just for this album.
So what was your honorable mention again?
My honorable mention was Murs, Captain California. I've actually only listened to it a couple times, but I actually liked what I listened to.
Okay. I have it. I haven't finished listening to it, but I do like Murs. I've heard his other projects with Ninth Wonder. Give us one more time a quick rundown of your three and then the honorable mention, and then we'll get into the non-hip-hop category.
So my three: The Iceberg by The Odyssey, The Wild by Raekwon, Run the Jewels 3 with Killer Mike and LP, and then my honorable mention is going to be Captain California by Murs.
And if you haven't checked out the podcast of last year with the top 10 albums, rap albums, as well as the top 10 non-rap albums, you can go to thesonicbreakdown.com and read the article we have on that, or listen to the podcast that we did on it as well, or do both. I recommend do both. So let's go into the non-hip-hop albums. And for this one, let's do a round robin. You go first of just one of your list of the three, and then I'll do mine, and then we'll just go back and forth until we complete the list.
Okay, so one of my albums is going to have to be Act 1 by Marion Hill.
Forgot about that. Dang. Were you familiar with her prior to this?
Not at all. Actually, my first exposure to her was actually, I don't know if you've seen it, it's an Apple commercial.
Yeah.
It's actually her single Down, and when I heard that song, I was in the room with my dad. We just looked at each other like, oh, okay, nice. So I just looked her up after that.
That's exactly how I felt when I first saw that commercial. I was like, who is this? Is there any other tracks on that album? Because I haven't heard the whole album. I've only heard I think 2 or 3 songs on that album. But the 2 or 3 songs that I heard were really well done. Is there any particular other tracks besides the single Down that kind of stuck out to you?
I would probably say the 11 tracks on the track list, same thing.
What would you say is the feel of that project as a whole? Because like I said, I haven't heard the complete project. I've only heard a couple of songs, so I can't really have a feel of the album. But is there a particular feel or a type of emotion or that is consistent on the album? Or is it kind of a mix of a lot of different feelings?
So it's actually listed under Dance and DJ.
Okay.
But I don't want to call it like a EDM album at all. A lot of the beats and production are a lot of EDM. It's a lot of bass and things like that. 808
bass up tempo.
But I would say it's a really well done, like, it's very good. It's a good playlist of music, if that makes sense. It's like very good background music, but I don't want to say it's like that. I'm not trying to. I feel like saying background music devalues it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying is because it does have a negative connotation when you say background music, but there is certain sounds in that are pleasing to hear where you don't actively have to pay attention.
Yeah. I would like to say the producer uses her voice more as a tool than her just being on the tracks itself. Her voice is like used as an instrument itself in the album. That's why I call it more of like, it feels like you're listening to instrumentals. And
that's what he said when he was, or I'm not sure if he produced the whole album, but I know he produced Down. And I wish I had that guy's name. He's the one that said when he's making that production, that's just as you said, he used her voice as a component, a layer of the production in the form of an instrument versus vocals, where you normally see vocals being laid down on tracks. Even in production notes, he used it more, like I said, as a layer, as an instrument in that, and weaving it in to help complement the production and be a part of the production versus just being an accessory to the production. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to check that album out in its full. Actually, I'll do it this weekend. Well, I'll go for my album or my non-hip-hop album so far. I'm gonna go with Thundercat, Drunk. I just really like the sounds, man. I just like the sounds and the feel and the features from Kenny Loggins to them changes, which I've heard on a previous album that he had last year, I believe. That song, I just love that song. I can listen to that song like almost all day, every day. The album, the concept of the album, the track that he has with Kendrick goes in on that verse, and just his musical choices on each track and how the progression of the tracks as well is just very interesting and keeps you wanting to listen and hear more and see how it changes. When I listen to this album, I definitely don't hear anybody else with the same sound. He is very Thundercat-ish, is very in his lane. Not to say that it's there's one kind of sound or one kind of feeling exposed to the album, but it's definitely his own. I can definitely, if I heard any track, I can definitely say, oh, that's a Thundercat track versus some other artist. What was your second album?
My second album is actually going to be Khalid. So this is definitely an introduction to all of us being with Khalid. He does a very good job at voice is so soulful and very, very, very unique. His way of expressing his youth in his songs with his production, I think he's laid on very well with his production. The production doesn't outshine, and he also doesn't necessarily outshine the production. It's a perfect mesh. As being a young person, there's a lot of things that I can connect to in his music. But yeah, he just wowed me with this project, with his first project.
Yeah, I would definitely say when I heard the singles, Let Go, Locations, every single that he was dropping, I was like, damn. I was like, okay. I was like, I got to find out who this guy is.
Yeah.
I even like the song that he did with, I think it's Alina Baez.
Yeah.
That's a really nice track too. He, like you said, he really understands. It feels like, especially for a young, up and coming new artist, he really understands his voice and he understands how to use it. Where one of the things that I said on Rihanna's album, Anti, last year, is that I felt like on that album, Rihanna finally really realized how to use her voice to like the max capacity. Not to say that, you know, she didn't have a good voice or she didn't have good albums prior to that. But what I mean is that she really understood the direction she wanted to go with her voice and not just make good songs.
Yeah.
And so I feel like he has that already with this album. I do agree with you. It's a very well done album. And what I want to say about his voice is, just like you said, his voice is soulful, but there's a raspiness in it that just, it's intoxicating. It's adding to the production. And I agree with you. And I think that's why, for me, that, like you said, his voice and the production mesh, because he's using that raspiness to complement the production in such a way that is beneficial for the whole entire project as a whole. I am very excited and to see what he does and moves forward with, as well as he's doing a lot of features. He did another feature that I think is worth of note on Logic's album, on the Suicide Hotline song. But that's a real good track as well. There, he doesn't have a lot of lines or words in that song, but you definitely can tell, you definitely feel his presence. So that was a very good ad, man. So yeah, both of them are very good ads that I think people are talking about, but I don't think people are really putting on the level that they should be.
Yeah, I agree.
They're both of your first two are very musically inclined, not just making good songs or good singers. They're very in touch with the production and the music. My second one is gonna be Sid Finn. I like Sid from the internet. I think she just has an amazing voice, and just the same thing as the two people you mentioned prior, is just a musicality about her is kind of unrivaled in a lot of the new and up and coming artists. She has an approach and an ear for production that suits her so well, and diverse. Because if you listen to the prior internet albums and that, like Ego Death, and then you listen to this album, you can hear some of the same influences and the same sonic properties, but you also hear a difference and a different approach to this album as well. I will say I had high anticipation for this album, and I think that hurt my initial feelings about this album, is that I think I held it so high to a level that it couldn't attain it. And so when I heard it, I was a little disappointed in the quality. And then after I let that anticipation settle down and let the project grow on me, listen to other albums, and then came back to it, I really started to appreciate the artistry that she put in this project. So again, it's a very well done project. She's an excellent songwriter, and I'm just looking forward to seeing more work from her.
So I'm really glad we're doing this list, because you've named two albums that I completely forgot were coming out, and I'm so glad you mentioned them, because I need to get on it.
Man, I appreciate that. That's the whole point of this. We want to get people to think about music in different ways and to share music. I believe that's one of the main principles of music, is it should be shared, discussed, and if it's good enough, it will provoke some thought and emotion. So what is your third and final album on the Non HipHop?
I know we set a date for December 2016, and I'm very glad I get to say this album, Non HipHop, it actually is a very artistic person, very mainstream. I've stalled it enough. Donald Glover's Awaken My Love.
Oh, you cheating.
And I have to say it.
You cheating, bro. That's cheating.
Yeah, I know.
But seriously, that is a wonderful, beautiful project. I'll let you go, but I'm just going to say I don't have much to add, because I've said so much about this album, because I thoroughly, like, through every being in me, love this album. Love it.
Yes.
It made our list of top 10 albums. So read the article that we wrote on the sonicbreakdown.com about it. We really broke down that album, but that was in the very beginning. We've had more time to grow with it. We also did a podcast that kind of broke that down as well. But go ahead, man. Tell us.
You mentioned that we've had time to grow with it. As the months have gone on, this album just keeps getting better and better. It ages like fine wine, definitely. Every song, there was actually the song California. When I first listened to this album, I listened to this album all the way through. I don't necessarily pick out songs. That one it stuck out to me, and I did not like it at all.
Me
but
too.
I understand why it's on the album, and it like provides a balance with the groovy and funk and jazz like effects that are going on. But this album is mind blowing. It's very hard to explain, but
no, I definitely agree with you on when I first heard this album. I did not like California. I was like,
at all.
It felt in the beginning. It felt like I was like, what the fuck is this shit? I was like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
Like I was like, this. I don't get the feel. I don't get how it fits into the album. But just like you said, as it grew on me, I realized the album needed a brief moment of I won't say sunshine, but it felt like, because the album is sonically a little bit more darker, darker, heavy, earthy, that kind of feel. And listening to the album as a whole, to me, it felt like it was a break of sunlight through the clouds. So it just kind of just brightened it up enough, as well as, I believe, because I'm not looking at the track list offhand, but I've listened to the album enough that I think it's right before or right after Baby Boy, or before Baby Boy. It's like, I know it's around there.
Yes, it is. Yes.
And so I also think that it was kind of playing off of that the joy and the feelings that you get with babies. You know what I'm saying? That euphoric feeling, because babies are just like, they're just balls of joy and energy. You know what I'm saying? That's usually what we think of. And I think that was kind of playing off that as well. What is, and I know it's like choosing your favorite child, but did you have a particular track, let's say, that you loved in the beginning that you still love, or that you've grown to a different one that you love now?
I'm gonna go ahead and exclude Redbone just because that song is just as popular and it's super mainstream now. It's still an amazing track. It's probably one of my favorites. But I'm actually going to say one of my favorites that I didn't enjoy at the beginning, but I do now, is Stand Tall. And the only reason I didn't like it originally was because I feel like Stand Tall was going back to how he used to approach a song, and it didn't fit to me in terms of the album. But it's the way he sings on the album. He does a little bit of rapping, a little bit of spoken word, and then the production, just the beginning of it, it's like a very ambient sound that's going on, like womp womp boom. And Stand Tall is definitely one of my favorites I grew on it.
I would say when I first heard the album, I really enjoyed Stand Tall, and the reason why I did is because it has elements of Strawberry Letter 23, which I originally heard Tevin Campbell do, which he took from another artist prior. And so that's kind of why it resonated with me, just because it took me back to those days when I was listening to Tevin Campbell, and I was like, oh shit. And it made me think about Tevin Campbell, and I like Tevin Campbell and the music that he bring out. So I have good memories associated with that sound. Yeah. And I also liked the progression of that song in particular. It's a longer song. I think it's the longest song on the album. And you're right. The production changes. It moves so fluidly, and it feels like a mini story within the production. Even if you just took out the words and just let the production play, you get 3 different type of emotions, and they all tie in together. And then when you add on the words and his vocal abilities, as well as the singing, like you said, the spoken word, and all of that tied together, it reminded me somewhat of Marvin Gaye, and not necessarily in the sound, because it does have a older quality in the sound. But the Marvin Gaye reference that I'm getting is just the approach of telling a story and with all the sonic properties as well as your voice. One of the tracks that I initially just, oh my gosh, I just loved, I still love it now, is Terrified. I just love, something about that. I can't even, like you said, there's certain things you just can't put in the words, but when I hear it, I just love it. And the song that I loved then, but even grew more to love, is Zombie. I just like the idea, the concept, the idea of people using you for the things that you have or you can give them. And just the cause you can take that into many different forms of, the industry trying to use and feed off of artists in that respect, or just people in your daily life just trying to use you for the things that you have, or the money or the influence or whatever it is that you can provide them, but not giving anything back. Cause zombies, all they do is take. They're not giving anything back. There's no reciprocation. There's no benefit to the person that the zombie's eating. You're just getting killed. Yeah. So I just thought I can't say much more about this album. It's just, if you haven't listened to it, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. You better get on it. That's all I know.
I would love to hear your third album.
My third album is Jidenna the Chief. The reason why I picked this album as my third album is it is kind of in the hip hop, but I don't feel like it's your traditional hip hop. Because of the sounds. There's a lot of worldly sounds on here, similar to the approach that Drake had with More Life, but I just feel like the approach and execution was carried out better on this album than it was, for me, than it was on More Life. There's a lot of African sounds. There's a lot of there's even some rock or influences on this album, and it's very subtle. I also just there's the single that he came out with was Bambi for this album. And the first thing that I said when I heard that single was that Bambi had a Harry Belafonte type of feel to it. Again, that's just not something that I expected from Jidenna. So I like that added surprise of that. And I just thought it was very well done. The production on that track in particular is very simple, but still elegant. And then he has harder tracks like The Chief. Then he has softer tracks like Trampoline, which it just has a nice bounce to it. To me, this album is the perfect album for now that, the weather is getting better, warmer. It has a very summer vibe. Like,
yes.
Just playing it, I can just see myself riding with the windows down, or if you have a sunroof, putting that sunroof up, or a drop top, dropping that down and just being in the sun, just listening to that album and just being in a good space. And so that's why I picked that album. And it did get a lot of play and notoriety, but it felt like it died off and it didn't get as much as I believe that the album deserves. There are some tracks on the album that I don't necessarily play often, but I can play the album from beginning to end. I can, but there are tracks that I tend to, if I'm playing it, be like, I'm going to skip that, So, but I do think it's a very good project. Have you heard that album?
I have, actually, and I actually wanted just to add on with what you said. After he came out with his first single, The Classic Gun,
yeah.
I actually had no idea what route he was going to take. I didn't know if he was going to go super pop or if he was going to go, like maybe an underground hip hop, because I had no information on who he was.
Same here.
But I would agree with you that this album is going to be perfect when as we're moving into summer. Drop that top down, play it in the car. And I also agree that skipping a track on this album, skipping a couple of tracks, does not hinder the album. The album is still very well put together.
Correct.
And once again, I would agree. He does what Drake does in a better way in terms of just having that playlist that works.
Yeah.
Just a different sound.
Yeah.
Good job, Janelle Monáe.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, she's. I love her too. That's all. To me, at this moment in time, I would say, and I know this is going to be maybe an outlandish statement to some, and she has a lot more work to do in order to live up to the statement, but she's the closest thing that we have to Prince now.
Oh, 100% agree. 100% agree.
Yeah. So, and again, I'm not saying she's Prince. So everybody don't blow my Twitter up. Don't blow my Instagram up. I'm not saying that. Prince is in a lane of his own. But if how they were saying Kobe's the next Jordan or LeBron's supposedly going to be the next Jordan, she's the closest thing that we have right now to the next Prince.
Yes, I believe she carries that model that he broke the ceiling with. She carries it very well, whether it be with her fashion, her artistry, the way she's an independent label, right?
Yeah.
She's independent. She's woke, but she's not preachy. I would agree with you on that.
Quickly go over your 3 non-hip-hop albums again, and then go into your honorable mention, just so.
So, yes, my first album that I picked, the non-hip-hop album, is going to be American Teen by Khaled. My second album is going to be Act 1 by Marion Hill. And then my third album, very mainstream, Awaken My Love by Childish Gambino.
Yeah, that's a nice list, man. That's a nice list. So what's that honorable mention?
I actually don't have an honorable mention.
Okay, that's fine.
I've actually been listening to a lot more hip-hop than non-hip-hop this year. So, and that's funny that you brought up Thundercat and Sid, because I haven't even heard their album. So hopefully Thundercat will be on that honorable mention when I listen to that coming up. Okay.
So to quickly go over my 3 real quick, and then I'll go into my honorable mention. I have, again, no particular order, Sid with Finn, and that's Fin. Jidenna with The Chief. And then our third one is Thundercat Drunk. My honorable mention album or project is Sampha Process. The ones that really made my list are ones that either had different sonic properties that you normally don't hear, but that still were pleasing to the ear, or were just so musically inclined that gave us something different and unique. So those were kind of the main things that I was looking for. And with this one, he's just, what he can do with that piano and his voice is just, his voice has a way of cutting through the production, but it cuts through it so smoothly and so precisely that it doesn't come off as harsh or clashing. And you can also tell that he really emotionally dives into these songs. But I think he just it's a really good project, and I've seen him in other areas on other platforms just giving great music, really good, well thought out music. And it shows that he's very in tune with the musician in him and doesn't compromise that for sales or for the quality of his album. This album felt like, regardless of what the world thought of this album, this is the album that he wanted to give. If he was the only one that listened to it, he would be happy with it because that's the product that he wanted. And so I'm happy with the product as well. I'm very excited to hear more things from him and to see where he grows from here. And I just think the musical world is going to hear a lot more from this wonderful artist. So that's my honorable mention, and that's my list. I want to say, let me say, is there anything else you want to add to the topics of any of these albums at all before we close it out?
I actually wanted to apologize. I actually had to hold in my reaction when you said his name. I actually listened to his project. I love this man's emotion that he puts in his music. Mm-hmm. After featuring on Solange's album, Drake's album, Kanye's album. Yeah.
That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, the fact that he can, like you said, like he made the album that he wanted to listen to. This album is him. He made a perfect album for him, and if any listener loves who he is and has followed him throughout his journey within the industry, they will love this album. And I'm going to make that my honorable mention also, because I completely forgot that album came out this year.
Yeah, man, it's been a really good year of music. Like I said, all these albums that we mentioned here, the albums that Trav mentioned as well. He mentioned Prodigy was one of the albums that he put out there, and Young Dro was another album that he put out. Pax that he put out there. It's just been a really good year of music. We got Logic that just dropped. I'm still diving into that album. Let us know what you think your top top 3 hip hop albums were of this year so far, and try to keep it to the, we know the mainstream ones. Try to give something that we haven't heard or that we haven't discussed on here, or leave a comment and let us know what you think of the tracks that or the albums and the projects that we did mention here were to you, if you even think that they should be on the list. I want to say thank you again to Brandon, because again, this was a great discussion, and it, like I said, that Marion Hill, like I need to finish going through that project. So I appreciate you bring that out as well. And I haven't listened to my man Childish Gambino in a minute, so I'm probably going to definitely give that some more listens to this weekend, just because you brought it up. We'll end the podcast.
Everybody, I'm Brandon Hill. Thank you for having me once again on this podcast, and just look forward to more good music coming out this year, guys. We have so much more coming out, so look forward to it.
And again, I appreciate it, and we'll definitely have to get you on some more podcasts, and because you have a very good perspective and a good ear. So we want to get you back on the podcast. I do want to say thank you again to everybody that's listening to the Stay Woke podcast. Please keep on listening, following, liking, sharing, all of that good stuff. And as you know, our motto, live, listen to some great music, and above all, love more. And we out.